Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the International Ecosystem Feature Session, where we talk about the startup ecosystem and landscape in Australia and India and what we in the Philippines can learn from it. My name is Marian Camacho, Business Development Manager for Draper Startup House Manila, and I will be your moderator for this event. This session is co-organized by the Technological Institute of the Philippines Nurture Innovation Technology Revolution Office, or TIP Nitro, a university-based incubator funded by DOST and Wadhwani Foundation, a not-for-profit organization with a primary mission of accelerating economic development in emerging economies by driving large-scale job creation through entrepreneurship, innovation, and skills development. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce our distinguished panelists. First, we have Paula Mills, founder and CEO of the Academy of Entrepreneurs based in Sydney, Australia. After a decade of working in the education industry, she found a gap between education and the growing startup ecosystem. So Paula partnered with 16,000 global entrepreneurs from 50 different countries and working in diverse industries to start the first nationally accredited incubator in the world, the Academy of Entrepreneurs. Paula also focuses on delivering social change, having set up schools, orphanages, and launching social projects in Latin America, Africa, Australia, and Southeast Asia. So thank you, Paula, for accepting our invite.
Thank you. Honored to be here with you guys. Not here. I wish I was there in the Philippines, but big hugs and a big hello from Australia. Honored to be here.
Yeah, we're also so glad to have you here. So I'd like to introduce Monica Mehta, the Executive Vice President at Wadhwani Foundation. Monica leads the Wadhwani Entrepreneur Initiative, which focuses on college programs in India, Southeast Asia, and the MENA region. Prior to joining the foundation, she was a director at Omidyar Network, where she led education and skilling investments, as well as providing grants in India. She's also the founding partner of Kaizen Private Equity, India's only private equity that focuses on education. Her experience spanned across strategy, investments, and operations over the past 28 years, and she's also very passionate about impact investing, especially in the areas of education and the future of work, and has professional expertise in the areas of financial services and emerging technologies. So thank you, Monica, for joining us.
Thank you for having me here, Marion. I'm really excited to share with my co-panelists some thoughts on, various startup ecosystem challenges and questions. So excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Again, also very thankful to have you here. So lastly, we have Shashank Randev, founder VC at 100x.vc, India's first venture fund that invests in early-stage startups using iSafe notes. Shashank has previously worked in large companies, including a SaaS startup, which he co-founded, which was eventually acquired by a Fortune 500 company. He brings entrepreneurial and investment understanding with 15 years of cross-functional expertise. He is also an angel investor and advisor with a keen interest in B2B emerging technology startups. Additionally, he is also a member of at PIOCCI, or People of Indian Origin Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Thanks, Marianne, for having me. It's an absolute pleasure being here, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion and sharing my thoughts.
Again, thank you for that, Shashank. So first off, again, thank you everyone for accepting our invite, Monica, Paula, and Shashank. And I hope you're all doing well, especially during these uncertain times. So first, we want to get to know you more. Can you tell us more about yourselves and what you do at your respective organizations? So let's start with Paula.
My journey is a long journey. I think I've been a social entrepreneur since the day I was born. I think every cell in my body shouts out social entrepreneurship. And it's not entrepreneurship, it's social entrepreneurship. So I've always had this passion for turning problems in the world into businesses that are going to make the world a better place. So I was born in Brazil, raised in South Africa, and I started my first social venture at the age of 9 in South Africa. Then after that, I got to live in Mexico City, where I started another couple of businesses with friends at university, also with a social impact. And then at the age of 18, my parents got transferred to Australia, and that's when it all became bigger and better. So we're very lucky to be in Australia. I've been living in Australia now for 14 years, and it's been an incredible journey. And Australia, as we know, I'm very lucky to be one of the best countries in the world for the entrepreneurship ecosystem, because we've got a strong economy, it's very innovative, and it's a very young community. But the best thing about Australia is that we're very multicultural, which means that you start a business and you get to meet people from all over the world, and you get to develop ideas and build projects. So yeah, so currently here at Academy Spinners, we've got students from 65 nationalities, and what we do is we give students the skills and network to succeed. So this was the gap that we tackled a few years ago. And since then, we have helped thousands of students around the world, across the whole world, really connect with themselves, with a purpose, understand problems, and build businesses that make the world a better place. So yeah, so honored to be here. I wish I was there in the Philippines. I was actually living in the Philippines until the pandemic started. Came to Australia for a one-day business trip and got stuck here for the last 8 months. So I will be back. You guys are my home.
Well, we're so excited to have you back as soon as this pandemic's over, and once it's safe to travel again. Yeah. So anyway, okay. After that, so Monica, any thoughts on? Yeah, we'd love to know you more and what you do at Wadhwani Foundation.
Sure. So I've had a very unusual career path. Started off with investment banking for about 5.5 years. I really didn't enjoy that and decided to go get a higher education in the US. I really enjoyed my education experience there and figured that I have to bring back the best practices to India because my education experience in India as a student had not been as inspiring. So when I came back, I started off as an education entrepreneur. So for about 9 years of my journey here as an education entrepreneur, I dabbled in everything from skilling to K-12 to higher education. I kind of moved over then to the investment side of education and founded a private equity fund called Kaizen Private Equity with 3 other founding partners. And we raised as a first-time team $70 million to kind of invest across 11 investments in education. Very exciting because it kind of gave me access and understanding to all sorts of segments of education in India and globally. I then moved over to Omidyar Network, which is Pierre Omidyar's philanthropic investment firm, and again was leading education investments for them in skilling and the future of work and education, and got to understand the impact side a lot more. And like Paula was saying, it kind of inspired me then to understand more about and learn more, but also kind of give back more to the social entrepreneurship side of things. That was about 2.5 year journey, and we did both grant making as well as for-profit impact investments across the education spectrum. And had a small 18-month stint right before Wadhwani Foundation, where I was just advising and mentoring young education startups while I was supporting my young son, who's a budding squash player. But back to full-time working now at Wadhwani Foundation. It's been a 1.5 years and very exciting. Our primary goal is job creation in emerging economies, which we do through various initiatives. I specifically lead the entrepreneurship initiative, which we call Wadhwani Entrepreneur, where we support young college students all over the globe in about 16, 17 countries, Philippines being one of them, where we run our entrepreneurship courses in colleges, both the foundation and advanced course, and we really hope that we can support students to be job creators as opposed to being job seekers, and handhold them through that journey towards success. So yeah, that's my work, and I'm great being here and look forward to this panel.
Yeah, thank you for that, Monica. And then Shashank, same question.
Yeah, again, thanks for having me over here. I started my career way back in 2003 as an engineer, worked with a few companies in India, namely NIIT Limited, which was in education, still continues to be there, and Zensar Technologies. These are all large ITES companies. And then eventually stumbled upon an opportunity to become the founding member for a startup called VC Circle, which is a media research house capturing venture capital and private equity transactions. I headed the SaaS platform called VCCH, which I'm sure was being used by Monica's firm as well at Kaizen and many other private equity funds. We were fortunate enough to become, so to speak, the market leader in the domestic arena for research. Again, it was a function of time and the year which we were operating in. And we got acquired by News Corporation in 2015, which was a huge milestone. And having done research for 7 years for the private equity and venture capital industry, I also learned a lot about the whole evolving startup ecosystem. And that's what excited me to kind of venture into active investments. Um, I moved out of the startup in 2016, but again was fortunate enough to get an opportunity with the San Francisco-based early stage accelerator, where I led their investments in India. We did 16 odd investments between 2016 to 2018, very sector agnostic, and then did a few angel investments before launching 100x.vc with four other partners who are more um, professional acquaintances and mentors to me. Each day I'm learning a lot from them. And the core objective at 100x.vc is to create a large set of portfolio companies at the early stage and being the first institutional check in these portfolio companies. And creating a set of 400 odd portfolio companies in India over the next 3.5 years to 4 years. And yeah, so we're basically building a discovery platform for the growth stage venture capital funds to come discover, identify high growth potential startups in various sectors from our portfolio. So that's a quick intro about me.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Shashank. So for this round, I'd love to go through everyone and ask some questions. Some of this will be directly for each panelist. Some will be for everyone. So please bear with me as we go through this. So for my next question, it's going to be directed to Monica. The mission of Wadhwani Foundation is to accelerate economic development in emerging economies by driving job creation. So it's very complex. So how do you navigate working with different stakeholders, such as governments, foundations, corporations, and educational institutions in fulfilling that mission?
Yes. So each of these stakeholders that you talked about, Marianne, they're very, very critical in building out the entire ecosystem that we want to build out. That can really help us in our mission of job creation. And therefore, we have different strategies and different relationships with each of these stakeholders. The government is really important from the policy side, right? So we have an entire policy wing at Wadhwani Foundation that specifically in the economies that we work in works closely with the government to spur policy that can really enable the startup ecosystem and can really therefore create jobs. So we work very closely with governments, and we have an in-house policy team for that. When it comes to educational institutions, like I mentioned, across the world, we now are working with 300 top quality institutions, including in the Philippines, where we want to handhold them to get their students to not only understand entrepreneurship, but set up incubation centers to really enable the youth across emerging economies to take up entrepreneurship as a potential career journey. And we work hard towards creating content, platforms, everything that we can, including 360-degree support through masterclasses to enable that to happen. And coming to corporates, I think both in terms of internships and in terms of hackathons that we have with corporates, we really ensure that we work closely with them. Oftentimes, they're also our mentors, which is extremely important as part of the startup journey. So a lot of our corporate sponsors become mentors for our students, depending on the segment and the vertical the students come from. So we have a very, very complex ecosystem of relationships with all of these stakeholders so that we can kind of really support these students in their entrepreneurial journey.
Actually, as a follow-up for that, how do you bring them all together?
So I think, Wadhwani Foundation has been doing this since 2003, right? So oftentimes we have yearly, of course we skipped it this year because of the pandemic, but we have yearly forums where we bring together all stakeholders so that we can kind of speak about the challenges, about what we can look forward to, where the gaps are, where we can support various stakeholders, including the government and corporates to spur more innovation in the startup ecosystem. And then we do, yearly hackathons. We have, student participating, startup clubs where we again have competition. So we do a lot of different things there where we bring in corporates to be mentors or sometimes to be jury members. We also work with the media. For example, we had a show with ET Now called Wadhwani Takeoff, where we were actually inviting startups to, it was almost like a Shark Tank kind of show, but in the Indian context, a lot of different things that, ensures that all sorts of stakeholders combine their minds together to really spur innovation in the startup ecosystem.
Thank you for that. Shashank, 100x.vc invests in early stage startups in India using safe notes. Can you tell us more about safe notes and how it's a good alternative funding? It's a good alternative compared to equity and convertible debt for venture capital funding.
Sure. I mean, so to answer your question, I'll break it in two different parts. So one is early stage seed or micro VCs, and then you've got the growth stage VCs. Now, at the growth stage and private equity levels, a typical shareholders agreement or equity transactions make a lot of sense. But at an early stage, when you're starting your journey as an entrepreneur and you're looking for seed capital, which ranges between 35K USD all the way up to 100K USD, uh, the essence lies in how quickly can you get that money to build out the product and solution. Now, if it takes you 6 months to close the transaction because you're doing a shareholders agreement and allocating equity, and not to say that you're assigning a valuation very early on for your company, which necessarily not should not be the case, that those are the stages where an iSafe really works. Its ability to close transaction within 20 to 25 days without allocating equity upfront, um, the ability to get converted at a future round really helps at least the developing early stage ecosystem to quickly have successful, or at least we hope has a large number of successful startups and reduce the failure rate which happens at the seed level. And I think that's the important bit about safe notes. It's a new instrument which we've introduced in India. Typically in India, what was happening was, if you're wanting to raise a small check size of 50K to 75K USD, it could take you anywhere between 60 days to 90 days. With an iSafe, you can close the round within 10 to 15 days. And that's the core problem which we're trying to solve, is to quickly give access to seed capital to early stage entrepreneurs and help them scale and reach the next level so that they're able to raise a pre-series A to a series A.
Thank you for that, Shashank. So, Paula, this is for you. The Academy of Entrepreneurs is very unique because students will be mentored by entrepreneurs who have built and scaled successful businesses and startups around the world. What was your why, your reason, or your motivation in building it? And so far, what role does it play in building the startup ecosystem in your community?
So when we started Academy Spinners, we realized that most people weren't happy. They weren't doing what they loved. They weren't working towards a purpose. And we started seeing that the more students studied, the less employable they were. That academic education wasn't giving them the skills, knowledge, or connections for them to succeed. And we just really, really, really want to understand, why is it that 96% of businesses fail in the first 10 years? Like, literally didn't make sense. Google has free information. There's more and more institutions opening every single day. How come we aren't bridging these gaps, and the gaps only getting bigger and bigger? So what we did is we interviewed thousands of entrepreneurs to understand what is it that makes someone successful. And we realized that everyone's born as a leader to shine, but we haven't learned the entrepreneurial skills. So you can be the greatest photographer, videographer, but you don't know how to get your first client, how to do your social media strategy, how to manage your personal finance separate from your business finance, how to pitch to investors. So while we actually got really lucky. This wasn't part of the strategy, but while we were conducting market research to understand the gaps, what were the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs made? What were the biggest achievements that they had along the way? What were the tools that they were using? So while we were collecting this data, we were actually building, without realizing, the curriculum. And then once the curriculum was all built, perfectly instructed, it was in step by step, it was organized. We went to the Department of Education with the idea of building the world's first accredited incubator. These entrepreneurs that had helped us along the way by joining us, filling out our surveys, joining our focus groups, coming to our networking events, and so forth, they were all waiting for us to launch. So by the time we launched, they were our ambassadors, and they filled up the school. So luckily, we didn't even have to raise funds. From the first month that we launched Academy Spinners, we were a profitable business because we had such a big community that believed in us. They contributed with the knowledge and skills and the connections, and they helped us build it. So it was built from the why aren't people happy? Why aren't they succeeding? Why aren't we making the world a better place? How come banks are getting richer, public listed businesses are becoming bigger, yet we see the gaps between unemployment, sustainability, and all these other things, the gaps are only getting bigger and bigger. So it started by just a question that was it was a concern of what's going to happen to the world? If students can't find a job, what's going to happen in 10 years from now? And then we also got to understand, at that time we were just targeting the millennials, and now we target obviously Gen Z as well. But when we started, it was like, who do you want to learn? You don't want to learn from a teacher that has an academic background, that has just read books. You want to learn from world leaders that have made thousands of mistakes and can help us progress faster because they've got the experience. They can connect with our business ideas and progress. So when we launched initially in the first year, like one of the first requirements that we had is every entrepreneur that was teaching, they had to have businesses in 5 or more industries, so they can really mentor the students into any part of the business, into any industry, anywhere around the world. So the first year, I think we had 34 nationalities in the first year, and then we started growing, and now we've got a community of 65 nationalities here in Australia. But we're doing some really amazing projects. Like one of the projects that we're doing now, it's gone from us challenging the government to now the government being one of our biggest partners. So like the Australian government, the Filipino government, they always call us and they buy projects from us. And recently this year, we've done an incredible project with the Panamanian government. So 100% of year 12 students in Panama have been rewired into entrepreneurs through our platform, and we've done everything online, self-paced, in an app that even works offline. So we're able, doing exactly what Monica is talking about. Monica, I need to speak to you afterwards. And it's not about turning them into job seekers, it's job creators. And that's what we did. We went to Panama and they went, how can you help us? We're like, well, jobs aren't going to exist because Panama lived off Panama Canal. Less people are having things going through there. So we need to turn them into like entrepreneurs. And also with mental health, understanding who they are, connecting with their true life purpose, developing the talent in areas that they were truly passionate about. So it's been an incredible journey creating entrepreneurs, but like I learn every day. All of us, like, we've got the most incredible entrepreneurs coming in, but we learn from our students. Like just 2 minutes before we started this, we had like 15-year-olds from like a Catholic high school, 2 hours from Sydney coming in, and the questions they were asking and the business ideas, and that's the beauty of the entrepreneurial community. Like the 4 of us here right now, the sky's the limit of what we can create together. And this is what we've created at Entrepreneurs, not just the skills, but also the network, because it's so important for entrepreneurs.
Well, I really have to agree. I think this perfectly leads to our next question because, as you were saying, all the things that we're doing is building a great ecosystem in our community, like great startup ecosystem, a great tech community in our countries. How would you describe the current state of your ecosystem? Like in your case, Paula in Australia, Monica and Shashank in India. How would you describe the startup ecosystem in your countries? What makes it exciting, and what are the challenges that you guys currently face? I'll start with Paula with this one.
So thank you. So in Australia, we're very, very, very lucky because we've got one of the strongest economies in the world. Even obviously COVID has affected us, but even then, like everybody's still out and about and shopping. The COVID numbers have been very under control here. Like in Sydney, like I literally went out once for 30 seconds throughout the whole year. So we're very lucky that we've got a government that population respects and they follow the rules. So Australia has one of the strongest economies. It's depending on the ranking, the first, second most multicultural country in the world. Depending on the ranking also, Australia's ranked among the top 30 most entrepreneurial countries in the world. And it's very young and we're very multicultural, which makes it very easy for you when you choose an idea. Everybody wants your idea. It's not like when you go to, Italy, where it's more traditional and they just go, when you go to Japan, it's about the hierarchy. In Australia, it doesn't matter if you're a girl, a guy, how old you are, what your preferences are for anything. We just embrace colors and people and diversity. Everyone is welcome and everybody's got an opportunity. So that's super help us. Now, however, the only thing that I see, I personally believe Australia is the best country for you to start a business because it's just so open towards innovation opportunity. We've got a lot of money. But for you to scale your business, I think Australia is a perfect landing pad, testing pad. For you to scale your business, I think Australia will open all of the doors and then you can then jump into the Philippines, India, China, wherever it is, or United States or Germany. So I think Australia is perfect for you to test. But if you want to scale, we've got a population of 25 million people. How much can you scale? I was born in the country that had more than 25 million people. Here's the whole country. And the logistic, we've got deserts, and we've got so much ocean around and highways. It's like, so I think if you scale your business, then you have to go to another country. And one challenge that we currently have in Australia is regulation. Australia is one of the most regulated countries in the world. It's even said that it's got more rules than the ratio than any other country in the world. So like this one is an incredible incubator and it's the biggest fintech incubator in the world. And the fintech regulation in Australia got so strict that they became a reg tech. So they had to completely pivot. The biggest fintech incubator of the world had to to become a reg tech because it's all about regulation. So it's great for you to start things in Australia, but as you start scaling, the government starts going, what are you doing? Let's put some rules here. And that's when I suggest everybody to like test it in Australia. You'll have a profitable business from the first year. Like it's so easy. Like I've never met anyone that works hard that didn't have a profitable business in Australia in the first year. But if you want to scale and really shake things, then just move your head office to like, I don't know, like Singapore or somewhere. Yeah, so I'm just telling you guys, like, really, like, insight that even some Australians aren't aware of. Having lived in South Africa, Mexico, Brazil, third world countries, developing countries where you can do anything and everything's a possibility, I find that the rules to scaling your business here can be a little limiting. So there's an incentive for you to start, but we've got something in Australia, it's called the tall poppy syndrome. So poppies are these little flowers, and as soon as they start growing too much, they catch it, and when everybody comes to this point, everybody's just like upper middle class. It's not too much, so like, let's bring it back to reality. But for us as entrepreneurs that want to break the rules and shake things, it can get a bit suffocating. And that's when I just jumped in a plane and moved to the Philippines, because Philippines doesn't have this. Philippines is all about growth and let's become bigger and better every day. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's very exciting, especially coming from, Australia has always been one of the epicenters for development in the Southern Hemisphere. It is the largest, I think, ecosystem in the Southern Hemisphere. So it's really amazing that you're sharing these things, and it's a great opportunity for our startups in the Philippines and everywhere else to start a business in Australia, specifically in Sydney.
or even like testing around. If you look at Facebook, Apple, all of the Google, they test all of the products here. Because not all, but a lot of the products are tested here because we've got like we're open towards innovation. Everybody has an iPhone, an iWatch. Like it's just the economy is so strong and everybody loves having the first, like the newest thing in the market. So I see a lot of businesses, they come in, and even like traditional business, they come in and they test little products here. And if it works in Australia, then you've got like literally we're based in Pyrmont, 5 kilometers from us. If you drive 5 kilometers in 10 different locations, you'll find 10 different suburbs with 10 different nationalities. Instead of me having to fly to India, I can just drive to little India, which is like a 5-minute drive from here. Speak to the Indian community, see if they like the flavor, the food, the technology, the app. They'll give me feedback. They'll open doors for connections. And then by the time I land in India, I've already got the meetings booked. So I don't have to do market research, start from scratch in India, and start testing it in Australia. And Sydney, of course, like it's where 87% of the startups are created in Sydney. So yeah, and it's just all created like in the suburb we're in, like we're in the main area.
Oh, that's it. That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Shashank, let's go to you. Same question. How would you describe the startup ecosystem in your country, and what makes it exciting, and what are the challenges that the ecosystem face?
So I think India is at a very interesting point in its journey, and I've been advocating this thought, and I've been discussing with the ecosystem players for a very long time that this time, even during COVID, India is at a point where possibly Silicon Valley was in the 1960s. You've got a lot of innovation coming in. We have a host of startups. We've got the government support for the first time, where India's been known for having a very passive government, not supporting or not being aware of what's happening in the private sector. And for the first time, it's turning where we're seeing the government support for the startup ecosystem in terms of how to get started, in terms of registering a startup, getting IPs for your early stage companies, building hardware products, which was not the case in India, and most importantly, setting up incubation centers. The drive to set up 300 plus incubation centers in India over the last 5 years has been massive. And the kind of innovation which is coming around, very basic in some terms. Some of them are very bad also, but these are signs of an evolving ecosystem. And if we continue to do this process, then India is kind of poised to cull out a higher number of successful startups. So that's where I see this ecosystem right now. And I'm particularly very excited. Hence, we launched this fund 100x.vc because we felt that we'll have the opportunity to invest in 100 companies every year. Because we'll see so many companies coming out which have the potential. The other interesting part of the ecosystem is, for the first time, we've got a huge population, right? And unlike China, it's a democratic country. It's not a restrictive country. So each state has its own buying capacity, consumer patterns. And also what has changed fundamentally for India is our in the hinterlands, or tier 2 and tier 3 cities, which we call them, never had access to great telecommunication. And for the first time in the last 10 years, a small boy owning a $100 phone in tier 2 is as powerful as I am in terms of observing the content he can watch on the same data plan. Whatever I choose to select and watch, he has the same power and choices to make, and that in itself is a huge differentiator. Now, if entrepreneurs can build something valuable to cater to this segment, whether it's education, content, um, retail, whatever, therein lies a great opportunity. So I'm very optimistic and very gung ho about the Indian startup ecosystem because, as I said, we are poised. The timing has come where things, for the first time, seem to be in place. If we don't take advantage of the ecosystem now, then it will be a missed opportunity. So that's my take on that. In terms of challenges, there are just so many, and like any other evolving ecosystem, those challenges are good to have because if you have problems, you'll try and work towards solutions. So there is still a gap between the private and the government, and bridging that gap on a practical level, right? So, for instance, quicker access to grants for incubation centers or incubated startups. We are seeing them, but they're not very easy to come by. Access to private capital and the process of kind of uh, ensuring that you're building out hardware startups and then helping them scale, and largely the corporate innovation bit where you're able to connect with larger corporates. Corporates are still evolving in terms of how they work with startups, changing that mindset. You don't require you need not only the private investors to advocate that to the corporates, but you need government support. You need other bodies coaching these guys to work aggressively with startups. So those are again teething issues of an ecosystem. But as I said, very exciting time for India, despite COVID, and I'm particularly very excited about how the landscape will evolve in the next 5 to 6 years. So that's my take on the Indian ecosystem.
I think Monica will also add to that.
Yeah, I think Shashank has pretty much covered it really well. Just a couple of more points, maybe on the really positive side of things. I think Shashank did talk about us having a large population. Adding to that, it's a very young, large population. So we have the demographic dividend, right? And there's a lot of good quality talent coming through, which is really important for a startup ecosystem, to have young quality talent that's really excited, that's innovative, that's really thinking out of the box, that knows what it takes, to build products and services for Gen Z and for the millennials, right? And I think that's really adding to everything that Shashank was talking about, to have that pipeline of young talent coming through. On the challenges side, again, Shashank did cover everything, but I do think that they continue to have. I know that I have a lot of young startups coming out through our colleges. We have almost 700 of them coming out every year. But access to financial resources, even today, is not as easy and as quick as we would like it to be. And we need many more of the 100x VCs, right? For that very early stage seed investment to happen. It sometimes takes forever to make that happen. On the government side of things, of course, there is the Startup India mission. I was involved a year ago in getting Gates Foundation to give us a grant for us to actually support through our programs, incubators and accelerators across India that have been funded by the Atal Innovation Mission in our country that supports, the acceleration of incubators and accelerators and their growth. But what I did find is, there is, we're more focused on inputs than we are focused on outcomes, right? And if you really want to think about outcomes, then you've got to be thinking about success of startups and not, how many startups that incubators take into their cohorts, did the funding happen, but really, focusing on outcomes. So I just think that while the government, like Shashank said, is really excited about the startup ecosystem and is supporting it wholeheartedly, and I've worked closely with them, I think there is a mindset shift that needs to happen in terms of what are we measuring and how are we measuring the success for our startups. And lastly, I think I only want to mention, as an investor, the only thing I really look for is a great quality team, right? And we continue to explain to our young students that having the best co-founders, and we kind of joke about having hustlers, hackers, and visionaries in a team. It's important to really have a right mix, and therefore, sometimes when I see startups fail, I think having the right combination and good complementary skill sets. I mean, that's true for almost every country. It's not specific to India, but I think that our young population still needs to learn about having a good, well-balanced team. Yeah, those are the things I would say.
Yeah, well, we always teach here at Monica at Accounts Fitness is emotional intelligence. You need to be emotionally connected with your strengths, your vision, and build a team that is aligned to your values, but also a team that complements each other. You don't want to have everyone as the hustlers, the hackers, and that's where a lot of startups get wrong. Like they just find a co-founder that's exactly like them, or they give away half the shares of the business because this person sounds really good and they haven't really tested. And yeah, humans, it's the hardest part of a business. I remember when we were conducting the initial research, it was just like human resources for 100% of entrepreneurs, they tick the box. That was the hardest part of the business. And it's the hardest part when you're starting a business, when you're scaling, when you're exiting. Like that's why most mergers and acquisitions don't work, because the culture's not aligned and things fall apart. It's a hard, hopefully in 8 day in the future we'll fix that for us. You know?
I think, a good team, even if they have a mediocre idea, sometimes can really build a successful venture. And sometimes, mediocre teams with great ideas, land up not being very successful. So yeah.
We had an entrepreneur the other day teaching us here. This is just like your organization is as good as your worst staff. Because all it takes is one bad person to lower everybody else's quality. It takes one bad customer service to ruin your whole business. And it could be someone in reception that is not even making a strategic decision. But that's why people management and building the right culture and training and upskilling and understanding each other's differences and complementing each other is so important. But it is very hard. It's more than a full-time job. It's so hard, especially as a founder. Yeah.
So I like to add to this point, just on a side note. Despite the fact that we are a fund and our active line of business, so to speak, is making investments, and in our case, doing close to 100, we made roughly 30 odd investments right now. One of the initiatives which we started, and adding to Monica and Paulo's comment, is we came across a lot of early stage founders who were single founders. And one of the criteria is to invest in co-founding teams, complementary skill sets, as Paula highlighted. So we started doing a non-for-profit initiative called Founders Dating, where we shortlisted single founders and the products which we felt have the potential to scale. And on the other side, we tried identifying talented individuals in marketing, technology, so on and so forth. At the face of it, sounded very easy. It wasn't, because coordinating these guys, bringing them onto the table was a huge challenge. We did get great applications, but then the fact that when you got them together, some resulted in coming together and co-founding. But then what we realized at our stage, despite the fact that we are a fund, we require more of these initiatives, particularly in a developing ecosystem like ours, where a lot of founders are starting up, but they don't necessarily have access to co-founders. And as you rightly said, Paula, it's never easy to find the right co-founder. And when you do, sometimes you're not aware of how to go for a co-founders agreement. How many shares should you allocate? What roles should you decide? Because everybody's so excited in the initial stage of developing, right? And those nuances get missed. So that, again, is a gap in the ecosystem. And I think, at least in India, a more structured process should be there around it. But again, as I said, I'm very optimistic. So I'm hoping that it will get solved eventually.
There's a great book by Mike Moyer. He's based in Chicago, and he wrote this book called Slicing Pie. And it starts giving you understanding, like, how much is your business now? How much is it going to get to? And then you start getting shares as people are achieving it over time as well. We always recommend this. But it's very hard. People get really excited, or they give more shares because they don't want to lose the person. And yeah, you can super get it wrong. And I think the same goes with mentors. So this week I was teaching a project over in the Philippines for ISIP through PhilDev and the United Nations. And it was a fund from the Australian government that was helping the Philippines. And we were teaching about mentoring. And mentor's the same thing. Like, you can meet an incredible entrepreneur and he can be a great mentor for your business, or you absolutely don't click, or you're perfect for that stage and it gets you from the first 10,000 to 100,000, but then you just have to say, thank you very much, mentor. And it's the same with business partners. You can just both walk away and each one ends up with the percentage according to the amount of energy. And what I always say, it has to be a win-win situation. You can't go like, if you're working 51% of the work, you need to get 51%. If you're working 3%, you need to get 3%. And it's just about having, just like, I don't know, I'm all about, like, I think I've lived in Australia for too long now. We're too close to Asia, and it's all about transparency, win-win, long-term relationships. but in an ethical way. Like having lived in Latin America for so long is very aggressive and manipulative. And in Australia, we're in a space where we're all like, okay, how can we do this as fair as possible? Not knowing where we're going to get to, but we put little milestones and we measure along the way and we analyze. But yeah, it's human beings are complex.
I completely agree. Well, actually, we touch upon this topic very, very often during our conversation. We touch upon diversity, the diversity of talent, diversity of skills. Why is it such an important thing for an ecosystem to develop in a more sustainable and inclusive way? Do you agree that diversity is needed to develop a great tech ecosystem? Why or why not? I'll start with Paula.
I was actually having a conversation around lunchtime with a group of people around that. Like, I personally, I think a lot of it is in our heads. A lot of people go like, oh, Paula, you as a woman entrepreneur, what has been your challenges? What tips you have? And I'm like, everything I do, I give my best. And I'm dyslexic. I've been kicked out of 10 schools, and I own an award-winning school that shapes entrepreneurs. And I think it's all in your head. I knew I was different, but I've always been very aware of my strengths and weaknesses, and I let my world shine with my strength, and I'm aware of my weaknesses, and I'm happy to communicate with everybody else so I can collaborate with others. So we talk about diversity. Of course, the more diverse we are, the more we can collaborate. If we have the transparency and honesty of everybody being open and collaborating. So I've seen a lot of organizations, like the other day, we do a lot of projects with Google, and the other day we had the Latin American Googler community, we had Academy of Entrepreneurs and the BGN, the Black Googlers Network. And they were talking about minorities. And I'm like, we're not the minority, we're the majority of the world between Latin Americans and the African community. Like, that is a huge percentage of the world. And I think a lot of it is to do with the mindset. It's just us walking into a meeting, into a panel, into a partnership, and just go, how can everybody win from this? And I love, and when Wadhwani say that she's investing in social impact project, and that's what we need. Is what is the impact we're going for? How do we measure, and how can we collaborate towards it? So of course, the more diversity we have, the more we can connect with each other's strengths and create an impact. But also, I think the more diversity we have in an organization, the more we can be emotionally intelligent to see the signs and do the design thinking. How do we build empathy? We've got different people around. We start learning how to listen to the signs and get better products and services and UX out there. But I see it as something super positive. But I don't see a lot of people criticize women empowerment and women need more rights and more investment. It's just women, if you want more investment, have you asked for it? Have you tried? There's no such thing. Only 4% of the global funding goes towards women, but maybe only 4% of women try it. So I think there's opportunity for everybody. I think a lot of it that we see that of the gaps that are the walls between communities is because people aren't trying. And it's exactly what Shang was saying is just a kid with a mobile has exactly the same power as all of us. But it's about the kids going and just going, I stay, take it forward. So yeah, the more diversity we have, the better it is, as long as it's all going towards a positive cause, that everybody's transparent and working towards the same goal and using each other's strengths. From my point of view.
Thank you, Paula. Monica, would you like to add? Or would you like to answer the question, not necessarily to add?
Yeah. No, I mean, on diversity, I think we both, when I was at Omidyar Network, and we continue to do that at Wadhwani Foundation, whether it's diversity in terms of gender and, empowering women, folk more. We support a lot of incubators and accelerators that are focused on women and women in technology. So we do that a lot. And I think that that's important. And I agree with Paula. Every time I talk on any women-led forums, I'm always saying that, it starts with you, right? I mean, you can blame 20 different people around you saying, well, so-and-so didn't give me an opportunity. And this is what happened to me when I was 10 years old and etc. I mean, whether it's social, cultural, whatever it might be. But you've got to go out there. And of course, I give examples of myself, which I'm not going to do here. But, of things that I just took, opportunities by the scruff of their neck. And you just got to make it work for yourself. You've got to go out there and ask for what you want. And more often than not, people do to relent eventually, right? So we do work on gender diversity. But I also think, in a country like India, where we are already so diverse, right? I mean, India could be 18 different countries actually. And I think that diversity in talent is also extremely important. We talked about it from a starting team perspective, like the hacker, hustler, visionary that we keep talking to our students about, that we need all sorts. But also people coming in from just for example, in India, the west of India is known to be extremely entrepreneurial. But if you go to the south of India, you will see extremely high quality IT talent, right? You go to Bangalore, you go to Hyderabad, you go to all of these south cities, which are our large metropolitan cities, you'll see a very strong IT talent or IT pool coming through. And almost all of North India is a hustler. I mean, you can just go to any little town. And then you want to see diversity in the kind of startups you support, right? So we don't want to be thinking of ourselves as somebody supporting just urban startups. For me, a startup, I mean, technically these days when we refer to startups, we're talking about these tech-enabled, really large startups. But there are so many startups in India that are solving problems for the local community. And for us, those kind of entrepreneurship startups. So when I think diversity, it's cutting across all of this, right? Environmental, social, gender, all sorts of diversities that you want to kind of address. And we try to do that as much as we can. I mean, I'm not saying we're successful at everything we do, but when we think of diversity, we want to kind of cut across all of those parameters.
Yeah, thank you for that. Actually, you mentioned something about investing from not only within the cities, investing in the startups coming from the rural areas, like coming from other cities, which are not necessarily the metros. In the case of India, it might not be Bangalore, Mumbai, or Delhi, right? It has a good effect towards those communities. It builds and pushes development to those cities, and I think it creates massive impact for those communities in the sense that we're creating jobs, as you're doing at Wadhwani, and of course with Academy of Entrepreneurs, and just essentially creating a better ecosystem for them, so they don't need to go to Delhi or Mumbai or Bangalore just to have a job because they have jobs there. I think that's a very interesting topic that you also touched on.
Exactly. And because we work with teams across the world, like in Mexico, for example, when you go to a small town, for them, entrepreneurship could be starting with a taco stand, right? It doesn't always have to be like a tech-enabled large startup that's doing something great. And in India, it could be a pav bhaji stand, which is a local dish. So, I mean, I'm just saying that when we think of entrepreneurship, we want to straddle across all socioeconomic strata. It's not just the large metropolitan cities where you have young tech entrepreneurs that are building some really good quality tech startups, but also rural entrepreneurs where maybe one or two single or two co-founders that are just starting something small that addresses a problem for the local community. And I think that those are equally important for the startup ecosystem to thrive.
It all starts with a problem that you're obsessed with and finding a solution to address that problem. I think that's one thing that a lot of entrepreneurs, not a lot, but some entrepreneurs might be thinking. Some people obsess with their solution. Some people obsess with their problem. You have to be obsessed with your problem because that's the problem that you're trying to solve. Your solution will change. It will always change. And I think that's a very important point that you actually brought, Monica. So thank you for that. Shashank, same question. Do you agree that diversity is needed to develop a great tech ecosystem, and why not?
No, absolutely. I think Paula and Monica, they've covered the points, and Monica touched upon a very interesting aspect in India. From an Indian context, diversity is the reason why it's important is because each region has its own core strength, because we have very, very diverse skill sets in various geographical locations. How do you harness that into when you're building out a startup, whether it's from a marketing perspective or technology perspective? The other aspect is, as I mentioned earlier, India is going through an interesting phase where there's a lot of development happening in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And at 100x, and this was not intentional, that we decided to invest in tier 2 cities. We decided to have 25% of our portfolio as women entrepreneurs. At the end of the day, we are investors, and we want to focus on opportunities which are scalable and eventually get a great exit for the fund. That's the core reality of running a fund. But it is pleasantly, it's good to see that we are able to find more opportunities where we are seeing more women entrepreneurs, and they are coming for, let's say, as an example, tier 2, tier 3 cities. Once we start doing that, we don't ignore them. And I don't think so any smart investor, any investor would do that. And those are signs of, having a thriving ecosystem. So, again, adding to Monica and Paula's comments, so I completely agree with them. We cannot afford not to be cognizant about this, I think. And much earlier on, in terms of how you're educated also, I think when you go to co-ed schools, you work together and different skill sets, right? I went to an international school in Thailand, thanks to my dad's traveling job. And that was the most vivid experience. And from there, I landed up in a tier two city in India to do my engineering, where I saw people from different states in India. Two very different experiences in a span of 6 years. And that taught me some very fundamental lessons of how you cannot afford to have opinions about people, or or have a mindset that, okay, this guy will not be able to do that. You just never know who can deliver what under a certain situation, and that skill set in a startup can be make or break. So we're very, very open, and I think as a fund, and most funds are still getting adapted to how they should look at more women driven entrepreneurs, more diverse teams, and how do you eventually build a pattern to identify those skill sets. I think it's still an evolving field, but you just can't you can't ignore it. You need to be very cognizant about it.
Okay, thank you for that. So I want to dive deep into a current issue, current situation that all our ecosystems face: the coronavirus pandemic, and it has affected our economy one way or another, including the tech sector. No one was spared. How do you think your ecosystems adapted to what we call as a new normal, and what are the opportunities that you see out of this? I'd like to start with Monica.
No, that's a really interesting question. I would say that there are some sectors that have done really well, and people have really chosen to pivot and make the most of this opportunity. In India, I mean, at least from the time we had the lockdown in March up until now, I think a lot of food and food-related startups have done well, but have also chosen to pivot and understand what the needs of the customer are, and have kind of chosen to pivot their business model and ensure that they are supporting those startups. I think education has been another sector that was, EdTech was not as prominent as it was, prior to COVID. And I think a lot of EdTech companies have made the most of knowing that a lot of school and college kids are finding themselves at home. A lot of professionals, young professionals, and homemakers are finding themselves at home and need to get upskilled. People are losing jobs, and they need to find a better or a higher or a different skill set so that they can get themselves back in the job stream. And all of these companies have really pivoted to ensure that they're reaching out to the customer and understanding the customer's needs. So I think that when I look around at the startup ecosystem, they've really thought through what is really the need of the hour. We see a lot of young startups coming out of our college programs that know that because of COVID, there's a lot of community members in the older age group, like 60 and above, who choose not to move out as much because maybe they're at higher risk. And what are the kind of products and services that age group might need, so that whilst they're sitting at home, they can still be served with everything that they might need. So I've seen some really interesting startups come out of this pandemic, and I think whenever there's a challenge, there's always an opportunity, right? There have been some that have really suffered though, but even those, especially hospitality and tourism and those sectors which weren't able to for the first at least 6-7 months really do much. They've pivoted themselves in terms of what they can do. So, for example, travel sites that were only dealing with maybe international travel or even within domestic, traveling outside of their city, suddenly started talking about getaways from the city, maybe 2 hours away, where you can just drive, and having villa stays. And I have a friend myself that deals with this business, and suddenly there were like at least 35 villas that I never knew about just around Mumbai city that I live, where within the span of 2.5 hours of a drive, so that you don't have to be on a flight with your family, you can actually go and have a wonderful holiday, right? And we hadn't thought about this. The minute you thought about a holiday, you wanted to fly to some place with your family and have, whether it was domestic or international. So I think it's created a lot of innovation and creativity. I see a lot of that. Of course, it has led to several startups having to shut shop, and which has been unfortunate. But that comes back to some of the challenges we were talking about, whether you have the kind of founding team that can look at a challenge as an opportunity and quickly pivot the business model, and be able to have the foresight to see how you can kind of have a longer runway when you can't fundraise. So I think those are the kinds of startups that have unfortunately had to shut shop. But those that have been able to pivot, think out of the box, and really be creative and innovative, I think those have not only survived but really thrived during the pandemic.
Thank you for that, Monica. Paula, would you like to answer that, please?
I think when Monica, she's used the word customers and clients many times, and that's the thing. We exist as a business to solve a problem. We need to understand who are we solving the problem for. And every business that took a few days or weeks to research and reconnect with the customers were able to survive this and even scale it, because everything changed. The way we behave, the thoughts, our communication, the way we purchase, everything has changed so much now. Like, everyone thinks so much before they make a decision on anything. Am I going to get out of my house? Am I going to expose myself health-wise? How much money am I going to spend? If I lose my job, how much money do I need to have saved? Am I going to buy that extra something? So I think it's all about connecting with your customers. At Academy Spinners, this is what we did. When the Prime Minister announced the first lockdown, what we did is we became a call center of support for our students. And we were there 24 hours for them. And we were able to retain 100% of students. And I don't think any institution around the world was able to get the results that we had. But what we did is we've always had the students as the heart of everything, but it was all about them, 100%. They needed to pivot, to better contract, negotiate the rent, the lease, the staff, the salaries, and everything. We were there to support them. And time of a crisis, I actually wrote a blog about it and I've put it on our website right at the beginning of COVID. It's the best time because everything's negotiable. You can go back to your landlord and negotiate the lease. Things are cheaper. People are wanting to connect more, even with small businesses. It's a great time for you to launch a business because, well, no one wants to buy a big business that's making a big business. No one wants to buy a product from a big business that's going to make the big business like richer. I would rather buy one bread and pay twice as much and support a local bakery than go to the big supermarket. And this is what we've seen around the world. We're all buying locally. We're traveling locally, like Monica's talking. And it makes us feel like double good. It's not just the fact that we're not jumping on a plane and lining up and getting our passport stamps and being jet lagged, but it's also we know that we're supporting the economy in India. We know that we're supporting the local wineries and parks and cafes here in Sydney. So yes, I know it's been a hard year for everybody, but I think in the end, we're going to get so many positive things. And one of the most positive things that I've seen is how, at least here in Australia and our international community around the world, everybody that's connected with the entrepreneurs, they're telling, a lot of them came to us and like, can you help me find my life purpose? Because I wasn't happy before. I wasn't doing what I love. I wasn't adding value. So I've seen that big organizations, startups, everybody's been pivoting, or single individuals, around what is my purpose and how can I make the world a better place? So it will take a while for the economy to rebuild, for us to be like before for you to become a unicorn was so easy. Now for you to raise funds, everybody says, where's my money? What's the sustainability? So there's been a lot of changes in the world. But even when it comes to money, the amount of angel investors and social impact investment firms that have contacted me, they're like, please, I want to speak to students, because they know that social entrepreneurship is at the heart of everything that we do. And they're realizing that, yes, they could probably make more money faster with another business. But at the end of the day, us as consumers, we would rather give our money to businesses making an impact, and we would pay more for it. And investors and VCs have started realizing that, which is amazing. So personally, I've always been on the positive side. I've always been the most positive person in every room. But I think COVID has been an incredible opportunity for us to unite the world, reconnect with our purpose, work as a community, and solve problems. And I know that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we've gone like years back to what we've achieved. But we can fix that very, very, very fast. And I truly believe that youth are going to solve it. We don't need a lot of the problems we have in the world. We don't even need money for. We just need people to connect with the community. And this is why I loved so much living in the Philippines. The Philippines is all about community. Everybody works together. I see even our staff, we pay them and they give the money to the parents, and the parents distribute it amongst the church. And no one in the community ever, you're laughing, but it's true, right?
Yes,
and
it is.
And I'm like, but we're paying you like 3 times more than the market's like average salary. Like, and they're just like, oh, I could get a new laptop, but I'd rather help the community because my neighbor's kids needed, I don't know, new school bags and pencil cases and uniform. And it's just so beautiful how the Filipinos truly understand community. And I guess, so you guys in the Philippines, COVID is nothing compared to the amount of like typhoons and earthquakes and volcanoes and floods. And so COVID just came and just like, oh, okay, another one, we can do this.
We just had all those, like, we had all of those in this year. Like an eruption, a typhoon just last week.
Yeah. I got stuck there when I was in this. I was in the town where we had the volcano this year, like
Oh,
around about.
Tagaytay.
So yes, I know. Yeah, but I think it's just In the end, like right now, we're still like in adaptation stage, and we know humans don't like change. Like entrepreneurs love change, but the overall community, no, like everyone's scared of change. But this has been so like in Australia, everybody's practicing a lot more sports, eating healthier. Everybody's learning how to cook, playing an instrument, looking at what impact they're creating. And it's not just like, I don't know, like last year, everybody was talking about the straw campaign. And I'm like, really? You're talking about straws? And then you go to places and people would give a straw wrapped in plastic. And I'm like, what's the point of this? If you really care about sustainability, why the hell is the straw wrapped in plastic? It's all about plastic, like, and then you give like a sustainable, like recycled box for your takeaway food on a plastic bag. So I think now is the time for us to reanalyze where's our money going to, what's the impact, and understanding that the impact is not just the straw, it's everything else. It's about you, maybe. It's where you put like the recycled bins and the community and the jobs that we're creating. We're all connected. So COVID has really connected the whole world in a positive way. And together we will solve all of the problems. And maybe 3 or 5 years from now, we're going to be bigger and better than we were in 2019 or beginning of 2020.
Actually, you touched this up also. You said that right now, impact investing has actually been growing during the pandemic. It's one of the growing investment. I remember at an all-time high during the pandemic because people are looking for ways to survive, and this is why social entrepreneurship is really thriving during these moments. So,
and the investors know that people will buy more products. If you're a social impact business, you're going to sell more than the other one. So it's common sense that they're putting money. So it ends up, and a lot of people saying that these VCs are putting money into social impact just for marketing reasons. I'm like, I don't care. At least the money is going to the right hands of socially responsible people that care about impact.
Yeah, I agree. Sha, as an investor, would you like to add anything to that?
No, again, adding to Monica's and Paula's comments, completely agree with them. I think they've covered the entire base. I would like to just quickly build on that by saying that what's been an interesting observation, everybody took a backseat in terms of investments from March to May during the first lockdown phase. And what we started seeing in India, which is from a population perspective, very concentrated in Bombay, Bangalore, NCR, maybe Chennai and Calcutta, right? We started seeing a lot of migration happening for the first time in many, many years. I think for the last 70 years, we'd seen folks coming in from tier 2 to tier 1 cities. And I think never before had I or anybody in my known circle seen the reverse migration happen. Now, that clubbed with the connectivity in their hometowns, and then some of them, or rather most of them, deciding to stay back, uh, is a sign that there is a potential for the local tier 2, tier 3 ecosystems to evolve. Could be technology enabled, could be, for an example, local artisans in Assam, which is the northeast part of our country, where bamboo as a plant is being grown, but the byproducts are not being pushed forward. Those kind of communities are developing. Uh, from an ITS, we've invested in a tier 2 company just because they were A, building a scalable product. B, what was very interesting is they were initially based in Bangalore, and let's say their burn rate was $100 a month. With them being placed in this city, their burn rate was like $25. They were able to get more talented folks, work in a cheaper place, had the same connectivity, same internet connection, same channels to develop. Just the cost of operating that business was much lower, and that's what made the story exciting. So those channels are opening up for the first time. So while COVID is unfortunate, but I think it's also come at a time where we've been, as Monica mentioned, right? Education technology was sitting on the sidelines for many years. She was the founding member for Kaizen Private Equity. I mean, Kaizen had done multiple education investments. For the first time, one of our portfolio companies is an education SaaS company. Uh, up till March, they were at like 500 odd customers. By July end, they were at 9,000 customers. They're basically an online SaaS tutorial platform. So you can kind of come onto the platform and start building your videos. That need to come online, that need to do video conferencing, that need to just collaborate and get the work done, no matter if you're able to meet physically or not. has risen exponentially, and that is cajoling, forcing uh, people to kind of just adopt the new digitization methodologies. Another great example, which I feel India has, a great opportunity for India, and not only India, I believe Philippines, Australia, wherever, right? Small, medium enterprises which were not digitally enhanced or digitally available to the ecosystem. For the first time, they've been pushed to go digital. And on a final note, I'll give you another example. Manufacturing units which had been using 50-year-old machines for the first time now are testing out automation solutions so that they reduce the number of 15 odd employees who are using the machines, as opposed to just bringing it down to two people due to COVID and for better productivity. So those kind of those kind of IoT solutions are emerging. Those kind of um, artisans in tier two, tier three cities getting the opportunity of a shorter distribution network, their margins increasing. All those business models are emerging, which is very, very fascinating. And 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 I feel that we should be able to leverage this opportunity, as Paula said. Right? This is a great, great opportunity in terms of how you look at it, and this could really define the way uh, how we operate globally. Even in terms of global collaboration, for the first time, you know, uh, if we really had to had a conversation, Marion, Paul, all of us would not necessarily get on a conference call for such a long time. Today is the need of the hour, so we are open to the idea of discussing for a long time or on any topic, right? And that needs have changed. I'm getting a little excited. So I have one final point. The final point which I've observed is even in terms of sales cycles being reduced. Today, if my salesperson goes to an office, right, the travel time, and then in India, you typically wait for 40 minutes or 30 minutes outside the office. Now, either you get a meeting or you don't get a meeting online. If you get a meeting, then the person is going to come at 11 a.m. and walk into the meeting and give you a decision within 15-20 minutes. But you're not wasting that time. So my sales rep can efficiently utilize a day with having 15 meetings. Maybe if two are productive, but he's having 15 meetings in a day, as opposed to me physically going out, he going out and doing one meeting or two meetings in a day, which could be productive or not. So the pattern is changing. And again, it's interesting to see how this will emerge. And hopefully, if we get a vaccine, we'll be back to offices also. But I don't see the work culture changing and going back to normal ever. Um, and yeah, so that's my take on it.
I also agree with your sentiment. Like there's going to be a permanent effect of COVID on how we work, on how the dynamics will work moving forward. Which actually leads me to my next question. Because global collaboration has, I'd say, is at a very, very different dynamic compared to where it was before. Whereas, as you said, Shazam, when you had to meet like this, you had to physically travel to a country, and then do a conversation like this. Whereas now it's generally acceptable for people to talk using laptops and mobile devices. So with that though, going back to the Philippine market, and since this new dynamic is opening up for us, what opportunities do you see for Filipino startups that are here to convince them to expand into your respective markets? Because again, it became easier now. Well, not physically expand, but just get your presence felt in a different market. And what opportunities are your startups looking to expand in a new market? Let's say here in the Philippines. So I'd like to start with Shazam.
So that's an interesting question, and I'll just zoom out a bit and try to give my perspective of where India has been for the longest time in terms of providing services, right? We've always built out larger companies like Infosys, providing services and product solutions, or white label solutions, as we call them, to the US developed economy, because US still remains the largest market, right? And that has been the case for the last 40 odd years. But again, with other economies developing, there is an opportunity for, let's say, South Asian economies to collaborate. So let's say hypothetically, if Philippines has a talent pool, like India had a talent pool for IT professionals and building out core IT products. So if Philippine startups have strong potential for XYZ product, offerings, or let's say IT or whatever, right? It did pick up on the back end operations a few years ago in terms of setting up a lot of call centers because Philippines has the largest English speaking population, right? So that's a huge opportunity, and that has been leveraged by most of the business process outsourcing folks for many years. Uh, what is also happening in India is that while these companies have been catering to the US market, our own local homegrown startups, which have become unicorns, like a Flipkart, in itself is a huge company to cater to, right? And they also would require white label partners, channel partners, uh, various channels. That piece, if you really think about, is picking up where India can also become a ground for other innovative companies, not only from India, but outside, let's say Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, to come in and start doing testing out their products, partnering or doing a proof of concept. And I think that window has opened up for the first time, which was not there. We weren't, I think, open also in terms of engaging with any other company. A lot of Israeli companies have been coming in India and innovating in agri-tech, right? So that opportunity is open, and I think that's one way of businesses in your country which can start collaborating with various channels now. As Monica said, there's Startup India. We've got a great inter country collaborative opportunity over there. We've got various incubation centers which are collaborating with Indian startups, but also inviting a few international startups to kind of set up their more product offerings over here. And then there are funds who are not only focused in India, but also looking at investing in Southeast Asia. And there are a lot of them in India. So those channels have opened up, and hence I think it would be interesting to see while 100x only invests in Indian companies, but again, there's just so many companies for other South Asian startups to partner with in India, and I think that in itself is a great opportunity.
Thank you, Shashank. Monica, would you like to add to that?
Sure. I think Shashank covered a lot of what I did want to say, but just more specifically, a couple of companies, especially because I was involved with one of them. So Caliber is, the Khan Academy for jobs, right, in the Philippines, and it was our investment at Omidyar Network, and I think it's very well poised. It's probably one of the top few startups in the Philippines now, and it's a job matching website, but I think that it as a portal, it has the potential to explore all of Southeast Asia and perhaps even India. I mean, at the time that I was at Omidyar, I would often, really try to convince the founder to do that. I mean, I'm not really sure where they are. I haven't been tracking them as well, but I definitely think that there is potential for them. I also think, Brainly Philippines, which is a homework help for students kind of a portal. For example, Noon Academy of Saudi Arabia. I mean, you wouldn't think of Saudi Arabia as an absolute, tech hub, but they've been a very interesting education startup that is now started in India. I mean, they're also a homework portal for students, and I think Brainly Philippines can also do extremely well in a country like India. So I think that there are different aspects, of course, at the government level as well, but even at the startup level, there are a bunch of really well qualified, Filipino startups that can actually, enter India, but but really anchor themselves here and all of Southeast Asia as well.
Thank you for that, Monica. Paula, I actually want to add to that. So again, the question is, what opportunities do you see for Filipino startups to convince them to expand in your market? Also, given that Sydney is the perfect place also to launch a business if you want to expand in the Australia, New Zealand market, and even Oceania to add to that.
Yeah. Sydney's the best market, but I think first we need to acknowledge the talent within the Philippines, like the kindness, the community. Like there's so much that the world admires out of the Filipinos. I think first is the Filipino having the mindset, seeing that they're gonna add value, and everybody loves. Like here in Australia, we love the Filipinos. As soon as you say you're like a Filipino, automatically you're part of the family. So I think it's first the Filipinos coming in understanding that their strengths are very different to the strengths that we've got here with the Australians, and knowing that's the things that they can bring in, like especially when it comes to customer service and creativity, from music to graphic design to copywriting, which are things that are very expensive and very hard to find in Australia. I think that's a huge market. We used to have like a lot of call centers, but now we just click and we speak to a robot. But there's a few things that we need humans, and the Filipinos do it so well. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Like branding agencies, graphic design, videography, music, there's huge opportunity. And I always say, like, for you to test out your product, maybe bring in and maybe go into the Filipino community, because then they will connect you. And they could even, like, I've always been saying, like, buko pie, little like coconut tarts. I'm like, there's like 100,000 Filipinos just around Sydney, and we can't find Filipino food. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So you bring in these products, businesses, and services the Filipino community misses, and then you can expand, and then obviously you'll be connected to everybody. But there's a humongous opportunity for Filipinos to take what they've learned in Australia and expand over in the Philippines, or take it from the Philippines and bring it over to Australia. Like, the sky's the limit. I've never seen anyone meeting a Filipino without saying, oh my God, I love the Philippines. Like, everybody loves the Philippines. The Filipinos are customer service. When you hire the Filipinos, they're amongst the best that you can ever work with. The work ethics, they're just so good. So there's a huge opportunity. And this is what we're working. We're working with the DTI, the Department of Trade of the Philippines, of Sydney, and we're taking a lot of Filipino businesses and Australian businesses over, but we're also helping DTI over there bring the businesses here. So much opportunity for collaboration, because there's no point of us like reinventing the wheel. Like, there's so much that we've got across both countries that we can collaborate and then expand into other areas. But yeah, the sky's the limit of what we can do between Australia and the Philippines. But I think the Filipinos should be, I don't know, I think it's the fact that you guys have been colonized so many times. The Filipinos are always like, not always, but most Filipinos are waiting for someone to tell them what to do. And I'm like, you're a shining star. You're amazing when you do. Just go out and do it. You don't have to get like someone like an American or an Australian to believe in you. Just bring the product and everybody will believe in you. And I think it's more of a mindset. So when I was living there in the Philippines, I'd run a lot of like workshops around leadership and emotional intelligence. Because the reality is that the talent they already had, all they needed to do is that find a little bit of believing in themselves to make it and succeed and win the markets. So yeah, so the Philippines has full power. And I mean, you not only have the talent, but also you've got a very rich country. I mean, you're just perfectly located for transport. The weather, yes, we've got natural disasters, but I mean, you've got tropical. The amount of land that you have, that you can grow so much. Like, you look at Australia, huge country, but we're a desert. 100 kilometers from the border, it's all desert. You go to Japan and it's all mountains. And Philippines, you've got so much land to do so much. So yeah, so from the seaweeds around the ocean to the rice to the mangoes to the pineapple, everything, the cattle, everything. The buffalo as well, buffalo milk, which is huge over there in the Philippines. So yeah, so there's so much that we can use. And there is this whole thing of startup tech, but I personally believe that tech is a solution for you to solve a problem. It's not startups and entrepreneurship. It's not about technology. We use technology every day. We use technology and we integrate our phone with our iPad, with our laptop. But a lot of these things are almost free these days. You've got the freemium and you plug in, and the more you need as your business grows and you can afford more, you'll need an extra features. But it's not anymore of locking ourselves in the garage and coding. It's just going, what's the problem? Let's speak to the future customer, understand the pain point, and start building something through an MVP, minimal viable product. And because the Filipinos are so good at relationship, I think they will be amazing at conducting the market research to really validate their idea and connect with the needs of this future customer.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just to get a quick takeaway from what you just said, you mentioned about technology. It's not the solution. It's technology is only the channel where you deliver the solution, and it brings me back to that phrase that I always had in my head. Education is the greatest equalizer to create social change, but technology is the greatest enabler to create social change. So I think that's something that I also want to share personally. And with that, because we also don't have much time left, for my last question, what would be your message to the Filipino tech ecosystem who wish to work with you, learn more about your work, and enter your respective markets? And essentially, how do they get to connect with you? I'll start with Paula, Monica, and then Shashank.
Our hashtag, our motto is Boss Your Future. You're the boss of your future. You can achieve absolutely anything. So just reach out. My name is here. Go on LinkedIn, Instagram, just contact me, and straight away I'll reply and we'll start collaborating together. Don't wait for anyone. Don't wait for COVID to be over to start. Don't wait for borders to open for you to start trading. Start now online, like we're doing now. This could have been amazing face-to-face, but maybe we wouldn't have made it to the Philippines all at the same time. And now we can do it online. So boss your future, set goals, work towards them, and don't let anything along the way stop you. Just listen to the signs and pivot. But you can achieve anything, but you need to take the steps. It's about action every single day. Little step forward every day. So yeah, boss your future and you'll achieve everything you want.
Thank you, Paula. I'll definitely take note of that myself. Monica?
So, I mean, we're already in the Philippines working through, our representative, Chris Delgado, and who's been doing a wonderful job for the past 5 years. We are absolutely committed at Wadhwani Foundation to making a difference in the Philippines, right? Especially to young students that want to undertake the entrepreneurial journey. I think our next 1 year is going to be about building out the ecosystem. We're moving from, a small number of 2,000-3,000 students to 7,000 to 8,000 students next year, but we're really committed to hand-holding and supporting all the startups that come out of the colleges and universities that we are tied up with. But we are also looking to, collaborate with startup ventures that want to have us handhold them through the journey. We also want to collaborate with organizations and associations, trade associations in the Philippines that want to, work with us to create a better ecosystem. So we're absolutely committed over the next 1 year to making a difference, and I hope to visit soon when things are a little better. In fact, I keep looking. One of India's air bubbles is going to be with the Philippines soon, so I'm like, okay, I've got to wait for that so that I can get there soon. And we're really looking forward. I mean, we're already on that path, but we're really looking forward to make it. And anyone is just welcome to reach out to me, of course, but even to Chris, who represents us in the Philippines, and we're happy to help anyone in the startup ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Monica. And also, we'd love to help you when you visit the Philippines, for sure. And then lastly, Shashank?
Yes. So thanks again for inviting me, and it's been quite an interesting discussion. That my I really look forward to visiting Philippines in the coming months as soon as the situation eases. And our focus of the fund right now is to invest in Indian opportunities. But as I said, our focus is to start solving the problem of early stage funding and reducing the time taken to get that money. And we're beginning with India. And once we reach a threshold of, let's say, 300 odd companies or 400 odd companies, our next stop is going to be South Asian markets. And hence, from that perspective, we're very, very excited. The other point which I'd like to add is, when Monica said, this is also an opportunity for other entrepreneurs from South Asian markets, from Philippines, to come in and set up shop here and register their companies as Indian entities, right, as one of the options. And if that happens, then again, you come under the purview of us looking at investments into those companies, irrespective of where the founders come from or their nationality is. So from that perspective, again, very excited and looking forward to kind of evaluating opportunities from the region. We are quite approachable. We are at pitch@100x.vc. Our website is 100x.vc, and you can catch us on YouTube channels and our blogs to understand how we operate. But again, always excited to see newer opportunity and new business models, and happy to kind of look at opportunities from the region as well.
Yeah. So again, thank you. Once again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Shashank. Once again, thank you for our amazing panelists for joining us in this session. I hope this session enlightened us on the successes, the challenges, and also the opportunities the ecosystem presents, and what we in the Philippines can learn from it. Sometimes innovation is not about reinventing the wheel. It's about building on top of it to address our respective needs. So with that, again, we would also like to thank TIQ Nitro and the Wadhwani Foundation for organizing this session. My name is Marian Camacho. Thank you, and we look forward to joining you in the Q&A session. Thank you, and stay safe.
Thank you, Marian. Thank you, Shashank and Paula. Wonderful.